Hi there, this is a bite-sized Excel masterclass to teach you how to do a basic waterfall chart. Now, waterfall charts are generally used to show a transition from one set of numbers or condition to another, a kind of end state, with some ups and downs along the way. My kind of first critical piece of advice really when doing a waterfall chart is draw it out on a piece of paper first. Work out what you want to show, what your starting values are, even what the numbers are in each of the boxes that you're looking to create, and how those boxes relate to each other. So, you know, the tops and bottoms of boxes, which lines up with which. Okay. For the purpose of this masterclass, I've already done one. So here's an example of a chart that I've done earlier. I've just pasted this into Excel as a picture so we can use it as a reference to look at how this waterfall chart has been constructed. But as you can see here, we've got a starting value, we've got a midpoint value, and we've got an end value. And then we've got some steps up and some steps down to show the transition through those three states. Okay. So when you're drawing this out on a piece of paper, it's important to make sure that you know where things are going to line up, you know, where there's a step from this to this, and where things line up, you know, top to top rather than top to bottom. Yeah. And you can see here that this should make sense. So an 18 million vendor price increase and a 6 million service payment amount on top of last year's budget or 2013 budget will end you up with a slightly higher 2014 budget. Okay. Great, so let's lay out some numbers here and lay out in a table the data that we've got depicted here drawn on this hand-drawn, if you like, chart. And then we'll put that into the Excel graphing tool and it should lay out for us quite neatly this waterfall chart. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is lay out on this side of the spreadsheet the data that we've got here in a simple table. Okay. So I'm going to call, first column will be called the heading, and then we've got a column, we'll call it value. Okay, so the headings in this case are budget 2013, vendor price increases, service payments, a budget 2014 before reductions. So this is the middle kind of peak point. Then we've got some reductions. So we've got efficiencies and we've got a volume reduction number as well. Okay, and that will end up with a final budget number for 2014. Okay, let's make that a bit wider. Then I'm just going to bash the values in. So this is 1014, there's an 18 million, a 6 million, results in the 1038, 29, 12 and 997. Okay, cool. Now what I've done there is I've manually kind of put in the values and I've hard coded it. It would also be a good idea to replace these with calculations. So we can say that the budget before price reductions is the sum of last year's budget and the increases that have come along. Okay, 1038, great, so that checks out. My maths is right on my hand-drawn version. And then the budget 2014 is going to be the budget before reduction minus the sum of the reductions that have been made. Okay, and that checks out, great. Okay, because obviously when this is drawn out proportionally by Excel, if the math doesn't stack up, and this was, I don't know, 1058, this bar will stick above the ups and the downs, and that will probably cause some frustration in trying to get this thing to line up, and it's simply because a mistake has been made in the arithmetic. By putting formulas in, then that makes sure that that's not going to happen. This definitely is the sum of the things that precede it. Okay, great. Now, what we need to lay out now is the series that the Excel charting engine is going to use to draw the graph. And the way this works in a waterfall chart is each color is a different series. So laying that out on the table, that needs to be a different column for each color. Okay, so the easiest way to do that is to label a series of columns and then just put little equal signs to refer back to the master value that I've put in column C here. Okay, so our first column, we'll call it budget. Which is the blue series on the example picture. And then we've got a series of increases, let's call it increases, and a series of decreases. Okay, and then to map those to the values, I'll just use a series of equals. So budget is these three larger numbers. The increases are these two numbers. and the decreases are these two numbers. Just to point out here as well, it may be that when you're setting up the values that your decreases may be negative numbers. So the way to deal with that would simply be to code this up so that in the formula here, it wouldn't just be equals C10, it will be equals minus C10. That will get the numbers in column G to be absolute values or positive values, because if you put a negative value into a chart, it will try and put that £12 million block below the axis, which is not what you want in this case. You want to use absolute values, and it's the color coding that tells you whether it's an up or a down. Okay, but in this example, I've kept it all positive, so it's all nice and straightforward. Okay. Now, I guess as you can see here, if we were to draw a chart with these three series, what we'd end up with is the four blue bars, as we'd expect, nice big numbers up to 1,000. But the increases and decreases would simply be sat on the x-axis, or in this case, where we scale the axis, so it starts at 900, not visible because they'd be down here, dropped off the bottom of the chart. The trick to getting the waterfall graph to work is that there is a hidden series about here, below the 18 million blocks, 6 million block, 29 and 12, that supports basically that block in a stacked bar chart. So I'll add that in now. It may not be clear how that works. Once we draw the graph, it should be. So if I call this column float, now the invisible series that's supporting the budget numbers is 0. There isn't one because they sit on the bottom on the x-axis. The 18 million needs to float so that its bottom lines up with the 1014 number here. Okay, so the size of the float bar that exists here will be exactly the same as the number in budget 2013. Okay, so in order to create the float bar, I'll just put a formula in that's equals the preceding budget number. Okay. So if you were to sum up this column, we would have a invisible float bar of 1014 and then a visible increase bar of 18, which would give you a total number up here, just where those two blocks add up together. Okay. For the next float bar, as we can see, the bottom of the 6 million block needs to line up with the top of the 18 million block. So the float bar is going to be the previous float bar plus the 18 million block. Okay, so let's put that in. It's equal to that plus the increase. Okay, 1032. And we can see 1032 plus 6 is going to line up with 1038. So we know that the top of this increase bar is going to hit where this budget before reductions bar is. So great, that stacks up. That's great. Float for the budget bar, again, will be 0, so we'll ignore that. Okay, efficiencies and reductions. So these are the decreases. We need a float bar, which is 1038 less the size of this 29 million reduction bar. So formula needs to be slightly different this time. So let's take 1038 minus the 29 bar. Okay. And then again for the 12 million bar, we're going to use the previous float value here, less the 12 million size of block here, because the top of that 12 million needs to line up with the 29 million, so the float bar needs to be another 12 million below that. Okay, so formula for that will be the previous float bar minus the size of the block that we're sitting on top of this float bar. And conveniently, that comes to 997, which is what we're expecting to get to at the budget bar. So the bottom of that 12 bar will line up with the next budget bar. Great. It seems a bit long-winded, but I guess for a waterfall chart, you're not going to have hundreds of these float numbers. And rather than trying to deal with a template which has all these formulas already put in, I do think it's best to start from scratch each time, lay out your values, do your visible series, and then with your picture that you've already drawn on a piece of paper or just simply laid out by hand, it's pretty easy to work out what the formulas need to be in the float column. Yeah, and that stops things being tied in knots, stops getting, bars that line up bottom to bottom rather than bottom to top to show a series of decreases and other silly little errors like that. Okay, great. So that's laid everything out here. The way that we structured this with a series of headings and then a series of separate series, hopefully is in exactly the right way that the charting engine in Excel can just take this and interpret it. The only thing to be aware of is obviously the value column. This is just source data. It's not actually on the chart. If we were to plot this, we would end up with 2028 or sorry, 2 billion, 28 million here in this first column, because we would add the value and the budget and end up with a massive bar here. So we need to exclude that value column from the data that we're giving to the charting engine. So what I'm going to do is I'll select the headings, and then I'll press Control and then select these columns as well. So we're passing to the charting engine the heading column, and then the 4 columns: float, budget, increases, decreases, and we're not passing the value column. Okay. Then I'll go insert bar chart, and it's a stacked bar chart that we want. It gives a quick preview there. Don't worry, that doesn't look exactly like what we're looking for here. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. But if I click on that, there we go, it's drawn the chart. Lovely. Now I just need to do a bit of editing to make this chart look like the example that we've got there. So I'll just lay it on top of the data. You can see, though, highlighted where it's picked up the data from. We've got the series, we've got the names, and it does look like the names have come out correctly, and the series are here at the bottom. So that all looks great. So let's format this chart then to make it to look like this one that's been drawn here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the chart title. I'm going to remove the legend as well, because it should be pretty obvious which are the ups and which are the downs. We can see here the budget bars are in orange, the float bars are in blue and are still visible. And then we can see here some of the decrease bars, and I think the increases are there as well. They're difficult to see because they're grey with the standard palette. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale to match what we've got here on this scale. So if I go the format axis, the panel should pop up, and then we can go to set the bounds. We want the minimum to be 900, and the top can be 1.1 billion. Okay, so that matches what we've got in the example. I also want to change the number format here, because you can see we've got a number format with pounds and millions there. So if I go and put in a custom format code, so we want a pound, then we want some optional numerical digits, so I'm going to use hash signs for that. There will be a compulsory numerical digit, there's no decimal places, and then I want to use a million sign, which I need to put in quotes, because in Excel format quotes codes, an M on its own means month for date formats. If I click add, that will add that to the custom types, and there we go, it's formatted it all as expected, as we liked it, with that comma in place as a unit separator for the thousands place. Okay. This axis in the new version of Excel has removed default settings like the tick marks and lines, so I'm going to put major tick marks on the outside of the chart. You can see those just appeared there. That will make it look like the final example, what we're looking for. And then the line we need to add on as well, so I'll just put that on as a solid line, and the color I want it to be black for this example. Okay, and then we've got a bit more, standard Excel axis with a line and tick marks. Okay, plot area lines, we can lose those, we don't really need those. Series itself, first thing I want to do is I want to change the gap width, so I want to make this series a lot wider. This is really important for waterfall charts, because if your series is so far apart, you can't actually see the relationship between the blocks, what goes up, what goes down. So bring this down to about 30% helps a lot to give that clarity. Okay, so it's starting to look a lot more like what we want as the output. I'll just change the colors as well. This is the Excel 20, what are we on now? 2013 default. I wanted to go to more of a BT standard. So if I go to page layout and change colors to a standard BT theme, there we go. I think we'll do another bite-sized class on themes, setting those up for your Microsoft Office suite. But there we go, we've got some BT standard colors in here. Now I just need to change around the colors a little bit so that they match what we want on this prototype chart. So the budget series is blue, the ups are pink or red, budget series blue, and the downs are efficiency, so they're green. Okay, now the float series I've now got colored the same as the budget series, but I think we're ready now that we can get the float series and we can make it disappear. Make sure there's no fill and there's no border. There's still a border there, solid line, no border. There we go. Okay, so now the chart's starting to look like the prototype. We've got the waterfall elements in, everything's kind of lining up, everything's where we want it to, it's a sensible width, we've got a sensible scale. Only thing that we'd like to add now is some data labels to show what the actual values are here. So if I right click on here add data labels. Let's add some data labels. We have to do this on a per series basis, so each series needs to be done separately. I'll colour those ones in white. In the same way that I did the scale, I can go back into number options and set a format code here. So I'll put the same format code in as I did before. No decimals in this case. There we go. Click add. There we go. Let's put a comma at pound sign, millions. Great. I'll do the same on this one. And the same on the green series. There we go. If I go back to format code, so I can do the number option there. If I go to custom, it should have saved what I used last time. So yep, there we go, there it is. So I can just go and switch that, and I'll do the same on this one. Custom, and then choose from the list, and there's the one I typed in earlier. Okay, changed colour on some of these so they match the prototype. I think we've gone for black on green, and then we've got a mixture on the red series because that 6 million doesn't quite fit in there. So I'll turn them all black. Select that individual data label, move it up. Select this individual data label and turn it white because it's in the block. There we go, looking good. So that's looking like the prototype now. And I think that will do for the waterfall chart. One thing though to point out is this waterfall chart has been laid out, and because we've used formulas everywhere on the source data, even in the calculations of the budget numbers, we can change the hard-coded numbers, so the starting budget, the increases and decreases only, and the graph will update and keep everything aligned and everything helpful. So if I want to, the vendor price increases aren't so bad as we thought, so they're actually only 16 million. The graph will update, all the blocks move around, and everything still adds up and lines up because we've put sums in the right place and we've only hard-coded what's absolutely necessary. Okay, so say our budget at the start of the year was actually a little bit higher. I don't know, 36. There we go. Everything moves around and everything stays lined up. Okay. We can even go ahead and insert another series because say there's some other, I don't know, regulatory headwind, let's say, there's another increase. And that has a value of, I don't know, 8 million. You can see the chart has reformatted itself, so we'd have to clear this up a bit because the labels have gone to be diagonal now. But if I put a value in here, so that's 8, so I'll again use formulas to connect that up. And then I just need to quickly readdress my budget numbers here, my float numbers here. By putting 8 in there, the increase has appeared, but because we're starting from 900, that's sat way down on the x-axis, or well below the offset x-axis we're using here. So we need a float number to float that up. What's the float need to be? It needs to be the previous float plus the 16 million number. So the previous float is 1036 plus the 16 number. There we go. And I then need to adjust this float because you can see here that the 6 million is now lined up where it was before with the 16. So another tweak here, I can just drag the formula around because it's still the same thing. It's the previous float plus the size of the previous block. Okay, and that 6 now lines up with the top of the budget before reduction and with the top of the new block that we just added in. A bit of clearing up on the data labels, and there we go. Adapted waterfall chart, all looking not too bad, but a bit more clearing up to do with the formatting, which you should be able to do yourself. I hope that's useful. That's how you do a waterfall chart in Excel.